Welcome. In this video I'm going to go over the procedure of setting up an offline Wikipedia Kiosk on a Raspberry Pi 4. I'll put a link in the description to the hardware I'm using, and if you use that link it helps me out a little bit and doesn't cost you anything extra. I'll also put a link to my Raspberry Pi playlist where you can find my other Raspberry Pi projects. So my goal was to create a Raspberry Pi kiosk that would be locked down, so this wouldn't allow you to do key combinations to reboot the system, exit the system, things like that. So this could be set up with just a keyboard and a monitor in a corner of a library or a schoolroom and give students access to Wikipedia. And you don't have to have an internet connection, so this could be used in places that don't have good internet. So this uses a read-only system, so you could just turn the Raspberry Pi off when you're not using it and it shouldn't corrupt the SD card. And I'm also using the Surf web browser, and it's configured to redirect back to the starting page after 5 minutes of disuse. And I haven't enabled any sort of screensaver on the system, but that is something I may do in the future. And I'm using the Kiwix server to serve up the Wikipedia pages. And Kiwix is set up to send you to a specific page when you click on an external link. So what I've done is I've set up Nginx to do a reverse proxy, so when someone clicks on an external link, it just redirects them back to the start page. And I'll go over all that in the setup. So all the commands that I did could be put in a script, but I'm doing them one at a time so I can go through the procedure. And then also you can modify and use this for other projects too. So I'm going to be putting a link in the description to my video notes so you can copy and paste the commands I'm typing in and you don't have to type them from my video directly. So I spent a lot of time researching how to do this, and I haven't tested this in production. If you do find anything that I've missed, please drop a comment below. And if you can, please give as many details as you can so I can go through, test it out with my system, and then update my website. So let's get started. So I'm building this off Raspbian Buster Lite, so I have Raspberry Pi Imager up on my screen, and I'm going to place my microSD card in my SD reader. I'll click Choose OS, I'll go down to Use Custom, and I've downloaded the Raspbian Buster Lite from the Raspberry Pi website. I'll hit Open, I'll hit Choose SD Card, and I'll hit Write. And this will take a minute to write to the SD card. I'll type my password in here. And I'm using a Samsung 128GB microSD card. It's a Pro Endurance card, and I tested that in a previous video. So while this is writing to the card, I'll go to the Kiwix website. It's just kiwix.org. And then if you go on the menu there, you can go down to the server under Downloads. And then we have Kiwix Serve, and you want to go down and download this GNU Linux ARM 32-bit version. Then we want to go back up here to Downloads and go to Content. And then you scroll down to where it says Kiwix Wiki, and we'll click on that. And then this page has a ton of zim files, and these are offline Wikipedia packages. So if you just search for simple, I'm using this simple no-pick, and it's 449 megabytes. I've also downloaded the big version, which is like 80 gigabytes. So I could put that on this SD card. It's certainly large enough. So you want to download the zim file you want to use, and you want to download that Kiwix Serve. Okay, so this is completed, so I'll hit continue and I'll quit out of this. So now I'm going to unplug the microSD card and I'm going to plug it back in, and that will mount it on my desktop. You'll see it has this boot here, and I want to put a file in here called ssh.txt. So I'll just go to my terminal and I'll type touch space / and I'll type volumes / boot / ssh.txt. I'll hit enter. And if you're on Windows, you can just go into that boot directory, and then you should be able to right click and say add new text file and just name it ssh.txt. So I'll clear my terminal here. I'll go back into my Finder, and then I'll eject this drive. I'll eject boot, close my screen, and then I'll take that and I'll place it in the Raspberry Pi 4. Okay, so I placed that in there and I started it up. So here's another look at the files we'll need. This is the Raspbian Buster Lite I just used, and then we have the Wikipedia Simple All No-Pick. That's about 457 megabytes. And then I have the Kiwix Tools Linux ARM HF. So there is an outstanding issue with my setup, is that when the Raspberry Pi is booting, you can hold down Control-C, and it kind of breaks the system a little bit. You can't get into it as far as I know. So If you do know how to disable Control-C during boot up, let me know. I did a lot of research and I couldn't figure out exactly how to do it. And this outstanding issues may get more things if I find more ways to crack into the system. And then I have this part, General Notes. So I'm going to be using the Nano text editor. And when you change things in there, you want to hit Control-O to save and then Control-X to exit. If you're more familiar with Vim or Emacs or something else, certainly you can use that. But if you're new to this, that's a little tip for you. And then also, this is also probably for the newbies, is you can type shutdown-H space now, and you can do a -R, and that will shut down or reboot respectively. So you can do that at any point if you want to shut down the system or reboot it. So I want to log into the Raspberry Pi. I'll type SSH space, and I'll type pi at, and I'll type raspberry pi.local. I'll hit enter. It wants to confirm my authenticity, so I'll type yes, and I'll type the password, and that's raspberry. I may need to change my font here a little bit. So I can type raspberry pi.local because I have zerocomp set up on the Mac, and Windows 10, the latest version, had that too last time I tested, and so does Ubuntu. But if you don't, you'll have to find out the IP address of your Raspberry Pi, and then you can use that instead of raspberry pi.local. So I'll go ahead and clear my screen out here. So the first thing I want to do is do some configurations on the Raspberry Pi. So I want to run sudo space raspi-config. Okay, so I want to change the password. It'll give me a prompt. I'll type the password in there. It says it was changed successfully. I'll hit OK. Then I want to go down to boot options, and I want to choose desktop CLI. I'll hit enter, and then I want to go to console auto login, and I'll hit OK. Now I'll go down to localization options, and I want to change my locale. So I'm just going to page down here until I get to EN_US. And certainly if you're in another country, you can choose your locale. I'll hit spacebar to select this. I'll hit tab to go down to OK. I'll hit OK. I'll press down to go to the US. I'll hit OK again. I'll go back down to localization. I'll go to change time zone. I'm going to go down to US, and then I'll choose central. And these aren't absolutely important, but I do like to set these up, especially this last one is change keyboard layout. This is the third part of the localization options, because this can screw up how your keyboard mapping is. So I'll choose the generic 105 key PC. I'll hit OK. Then I'll scroll down to the bottom where it says Other, and I'll hit OK. And then I'll go down one and do English US, OK. And then I'll scroll all the way to the top here. I'll choose English US, I'll hit OK. And then I'll just press right arrow to OK, OK, right arrow OK, and I'm done with that configuration. So let's go back to the instructions here. We have all the localization options. Then we want to change the overscan. So I'll go down here to Advanced Options. I'll go to Overscan, and then I'll say No, and I'll hit OK. And this here says Advanced Options Resolution. I tried this and it didn't seem to work for what we're doing, so I'll remove that from my notes. So I'll just go down here to Finish. It says, do you want to reboot now? I'll just say no. It's not important right now. I'll clear my screen. Now I want to update the system, so I'll select these two lines here. I'll copy and paste them to my terminal. So update will update the package list, and then upgrade will download the upgrades and install them. So when you have the ampersand in the middle, it says run the first command, which is sudo apt update, and then if that doesn't fail, run the second one. If the first one fails, it will stop. So I want to continue, yes. Okay, now I want to install some packages. So I'll copy this next section. I'll paste that in, I'll hit enter. It asks me if I want to continue, I'll say yes. So what we have here is Xorg, and that gives us graphics. Then we have OpenBox, and that goes on top of Xorg. We have UFW, and that's a firewall. We have Nginx as a web server. Surf Display is a lightweight web browser. And then TTF ancient fonts are some fonts you need to run this. Okay, that's completed. I'll clear my screen. Next, I want to add the kiosk user account, so I'll type sudo add user kiosk. I'll hit enter. It's going to ask for a password. I'll just type a password in here. And now it's going to ask like full name and stuff. I'll just hit enter here. I don't have to fill those out. It asks if the information is correct. I'll say yes, and that's done. Next, we'll lock the password. So this doesn't allow them to use the password. So we'll hit enter there. I'll clear my screen. Next, I want to add startx to the bashrc file. So I'll do this line. It's sudo nano /home/kiosk /.bashrc. And I want to add startx in there. And I'll just add this towards the top. And then you can also put exit after this. So what this will do is it will start the graphical interface, and after that it will just exit out of this script. So I'll hit Control-O to save, Control-X to exit. I'll clear my screen. And here's a line to change the resolution. Copy that in. It's sudo nano /home/kiosk /.xsessionrc. And then I have this line I paste in there. It's x-rand-r --output HDMI-1 -mode space 1280 by 720. So this will do 720p resolution. So I'll save this out, clear my screen. So when we set this to auto log into the console, we set it up for Pi because we were logged in as Pi. We want to set that up for kiosks. So I want to open up this file here for editing. It's the autologin.conf. And then I want to go down here and scroll over to where it says auto login and says Pi. We'll change that to kiosk. I'll save this. So if you look at my instructions here, and I did this quite a bit in my instructions, I have the whole line there, so you can compare it to what the file has and just modify it, or you can copy and paste and replace it. So now I need to load the Kiwix files onto the Raspberry Pi. So I'll open up another terminal. I'll go to my downloads folder, and I'll try these lines. I don't know if these are correct. We'll find out. So I have a couple ZIMs in there, so I'll change this so we only download the one. Okay, I'll exit out of that. So it's hard to make really good instructions for getting these onto the Raspberry Pi because everyone's system is different. You might put them in your download folder. You could download them directly from the website to the console, but this is just kind of how I did it. So next I want to decompress the Wikipedia server. So I have this next line. So that decompressed the 4 binaries that come with that. And now I want to move those into USR local bin. So I'll run the next line here. So now these are in my path. I can type KIW and hit tab, and it will tab complete. And then I can type SER, and we have Kiwix serve. So now I want to move the ZIM file, and that's going into var local. So if I type ls var local, I should see that file. There we go. Clear my screen. So now I want to create a Kiwix service. So I'll run this next command. This will create a file under etc systemd system, and it's kiwix.service. I'll hit enter here, and I'll paste in this code, or this config, and this will potentially need to be updated if you use a different ZIM file that I'm using. So that gets chosen here, and at the very end of this we have -P8080, and that's the port it's going to be running on, is 8080. So I'll save this out. So I'll clear my screen. I'm going to look up Kiwix serve, and I'll do --help. And we had M and B in there. So the B says it blocks external links. So what happens when you click on an external link? It sends you to that page, and then I grab that with Nginx and redirect it. And the M says do not print the built-in home button in the built-in top bar overlay. So I'll clear that out. I'll start the Kiwix service. So the first command will enable it, the next command will start it up. Now we can check it with a browser. So I'll clear my screen here, I'll type IP space -A, and we can see that my IP address is right here. It's 192.168.7.208. So I have that, I loaded it earlier. I'll refresh it. So it comes up with Nginx. I want to type :8080 on the back end of this. And now we have the Kiwix server up. So I can click on that, and I can click through this, and we can browse offline Wikipedia. That's on our local web browser. But this is a good place to test that before we get everything else set up. So now I'm going to configure the Nginx reverse proxy. So I'll clear my screen over here. I'll copy in this next line. So this is modifying the default to Nginx install. So what I want to do is I want to add in this proxy pass line right here, and I want to add it after this try files. So if you scroll down a little bit, in the server section, if we keep going down, we'll see this where it says location / and we have try files. So I want to comment that out. I'll hit enter, and on the next line I'll paste in this proxy pass. So this will say anything that comes in, pass it to the local host on 8080. And then after that, we want to go to this next section. It says location cache. I'll copy that, and I'll scroll down under this location, and I'll paste it in here. So you have location is in braces, and then location in braces. You don't want the location cache inside of this other location braces. So this says if the URL has cache in it, then redirect it to HTTP and then host. So I'll hit Control O to save, Control X to exit. Scroll down, I want to restart Nginx. And now if we go back to that web page, if I get rid of the port here, it should work. And there we go. So if I scroll down to the very bottom, you can see this has an external link for Wikipedia. If I click on that, it takes us back to the beginning. So I get that this isn't the perfect solution, but it is what I came up with. If you think of a better way, you can leave a comment below. I'll go back to my instructions here. Next, I want to set up the Surf web browser. So this has like a global config, and then when you open up Surf display, it uses this config. So I want to change the default website to the website we just set up. So I'll go down here to where it's default www, and below it I'll paste in this new URL, and then I'll comment out that first line. And then I'll scroll down. You can see this default resolution here. You can just leave that, it'll use the whole screen. I'll scroll down here to inactivity interval, and we have 300, and that's 300 seconds or 5 minutes. So if you're on a Wikipedia page, and if it's idle for over 5 minutes, it will redirect back to the beginning. So you could change this to be a lower amount or a higher amount, depending on your needs. So I'll save this page, clear my terminal. Now I want to add Surf Display to the open box auto start, so I'll copy this next line, and I'll scroll to the bottom, and I'll add in Surf Display and our URL and an ampersand. So ampersand makes it run in the background. I actually tried this before without the ampersand. I think it was working, but as I was reading documentation, it said you're supposed to put an ampersand at the end, so that's what I'm doing. So I'll save that out. And now we're getting into locking the system down, and this was really tricky because I had to research all over the place. I wanted to use the best practices for locking the system down. And if you think anything I'm doing is not best practice, let me know. But also try and back it up with some information. So the keyboard I'm using has a power button on it, so the first thing I'm doing is disabling that power button. When you click that power button, it would shut the system down. So I'll open up this login.d.conf, and I'm going to scroll down here to the handle power key, which is right here. Oops. And I'll uncomment that. Actually, I'll leave that commented. I like to sometimes just add one below it. And I'll copy in one of these two lines. So you could just use this to reboot. So if this were to ever hang, someone could hit that power button and it would restart the system. I'm just going to choose do nothing. And then I'll save this out. Next, I want to disable Control-Alt backspace. So I'll create this don'tzap.conf file, and I'll paste in this don't zap is true. Clear my screen. So as you see, there's lots of weird ways to turn everything off. You have to go to different places to do it. The next section is disable virtual console switching. So this was one of the final things I had trouble with, and I got this one figured out. So I'll open up this 65 server keys -none, and then I'll add in this set keyboard map line, and that will disable the Control-Alt backspace. But you see it just said it's SRVR keys. It's confusing. So I'll save this out. And now I'm going to disable the TTY consoles. And I really should have done this up higher because it's the same file we just edited, the login.d. And I'll go down here to where it says NAuto VTs and then reserve VT. And I'll change both of these to 0. And I'll save that out. And now I'll disable Control-Alt-Delete, and that one I have to remove this file. And then I'm going to create a symlink to dev-null. And I tried to use this like mask technique with systemd, and I couldn't get that working. So this I found worked. And then I want to do daemon reload. So that will disable Control-Alt-Delete. I'll clear my screen here. And then I want to disable print screen. This doesn't cause any problem, but it brings an error message up on the screen. So here I want to have a kiosk, a home level config for OpenBox. So I'll copy this, and this is going to make that directory under .config OpenBox. And when you use a P here, it will make all of the directories in sequence. So if .config doesn't exist, it'll create that, then it'll create OpenBox. So I'll hit enter there. Next, I'm going to copy the global rc.xml file to the kiosk user directory. So I'll do that. And now I'm going to open up that rc.xml. So this might look a little hairy, but I'll walk you through it. So I have some notes here. You can type Control-W to search for keyboard. So I'll type Control-W. I'll type less than keyboard and then greater than, and I'll hit enter. I'll go down one line. I'll hit Control-Shift-6, and that will do a start point. And then I'll scroll down, and actually on my computer I can scroll down with my touchpad. Otherwise you can use the arrow keys. And I want to get to the bottom where you have the closing tag for keyboard. Right here. Okay? So now I want to type Control-K. And that will delete that. I'll get rid of this blank line in the middle too. And then I'll save this out. So within that keyboard thing there were these key bindings, and one of them was for print screen, and there were other ones that I don't really want to use in this application. So I show you here in the documentation, you should end up with this keyboard that's all blank. Next, I'll set up the firewall. I'll clear my screen here. So you can screw up your system with this. If you don't do this right, you could lock yourself out. But what I'm going to do is deny all incoming. Okay. Then I will allow outgoing. And I will allow SSH, and I'm SSH'd in right now. So if I didn't do this right, I could lock myself out. And then I'm going to enable this. And I want to say yes. And then after that, I'll look at the status. And this will tell us what's set up. So if I go back to this web page I was testing earlier, and if I refresh, this won't work anymore because we're blocking it. So this is optional. You could leave this open and allow other computers to access it. But I wanted to make this kind of a hardened lockdown system. So now I can reboot the system. So I'll type sudo space reboot, and I'll wait for it to come back up. Okay, so the Raspberry Pi is booted. The Wikipedia is up. I'm going to do one more thing here. And I could have done this before I rebooted, but I'm going to log back into the system. And then I'm going to set this to be read-only. So I'm going to say sudo raspi config, and then I'll go down to advanced options, and then overlay FS. And it says, would you like the overlay file system to be enabled? I'll say yes. It says the overlay file system is enabled. I'll hit OK. And it says, do you want the boot partition to be write protected? And I'll say yes to that also. And that's done. I'll hit OK. Then I'll go to finish, and it wants to reboot again, so I'll let it reboot. Okay, so I have this booted up right now. So I could unplug the network cable from this if I wanted to. So you have the Wikipedia here. I can click on this. It'll send me into Wikipedia, and then I can look things up. And this isn't Google level. Yeah, I actually typed that wrong. I typed two O's. It's not Google level search, so if you type things wrong, it's not going to find it. But if you see here, I typed DO. It did do some completion here, so that's kind of helpful. And this doesn't have any images in it because it's a simple version. So I can click through all these. And then I can scroll down, and if I try and click off-site, you'll see it'll take us back to the beginning. So I don't love this, but I couldn't think of a better way to handle that. Without the Nginx reverse proxy, it shows you a page that says, hey, you're going to head off-site, and then it allows you to click it. But I didn't want that. I wanted to keep people on the system. So I have this set up at 720p. When I was doing the development the whole time, I had it at 1080p. And I gotta say, I kind of like it better at 720p. It makes everything bigger. When it was at 1080p, it was narrow in the middle of the screen. But you can try both with your system and see how you like it. So right now I'll hit Control-Alt, Delete, Control-Alt, Backspace. The big one I had trouble with was Control-Alt, F1, F2, F3, F4. Those would take me into different virtual terminals. Here's a print screen. So I'm typing all these things and nothing's happening. So the only way to get out of this is to You can shut it down over SSH, or if you set that overlay FS in place, you can just turn it off. So things I'd like to do with this probably is maybe add a screensaver to it so this doesn't get burned into the screen. So if this sits idle for 5 minutes, it will essentially be like clicking this link up at the top and going back to the main page. So this also has a little dice icon here. You can hit that and it will give you a random page. So I'm actually going to shut this down, and I'm going to put another one I did. It's the same procedure, but I put on my large Wikipedia file, which was like 80 gigabytes. So it's the full Wikipedia. So we can take a look at that. Okay, so here we have the full Wikipedia. I'll click on this here. And this has pictures in it. So you can see there's pictures. I did find some problems. Like if I look up United States, there are some pictures missing, like this flag is missing. There's also audio here, and I don't think that's working. There's probably ways to enable some of this. And that goes to the next thing is, someone might say, why am I using Surf and not something like Chrome or Chromium? Because Chromium does have a kiosk mode. And this was simple to set up because it has that timeout feature that takes you back to the home page. And I don't think Chrome had that, but I may do some more research on Chrome. Chrome would certainly be nice for a kiosk also, because you can display anything with Chrome. This is a very lightweight system since we're using just Xorg with OpenBox on top of it. There's not a lot on the back end. I'm running this on a Raspberry Pi 4. I think I got it running on my 3, but I tried running it on my 1 and ran into problems, so I may investigate that a little more. But if you're using this, 80, 90 gigabyte Wikipedia file, it's probably not a bad idea to run the 4 for performance reasons. So I can click random here. This works pretty fast. I mean, it loads pages as fast as the regular Wikipedia. And I think this file is actually about 2 years old. Now you can grab images and kind of drag them, but you can't really drag them anywhere. I don't really know how to disable that. So that's all for this video. Hopefully this is helpful for people that want to set up a Wikipedia kiosk, and just other people in general that want to set up a Raspberry Pi kiosk of some sort and had trouble online finding different things. Most of the work here was trying to figure out how to stop Control-Alt-Delete, Control-Alt-F1, those kind of keys from taking it out of the system. Like I said, I still have to figure out when it boots to make it so it ignores Control-C. If you hold that down, it kind of freezes up the system. So I know this was kind of a long video, but if you have any questions or comments or suggestions, please leave them below. If you liked this video, please click like. If you haven't subscribed to my channel, I'd appreciate it if you could do that. And thanks for watching. Until next time, goodbye.